Ready, everyone? Say yes. Okay, well.
Yes.
Let's start now. I hope my microphone is better. I will approach my computer so that I can be heard better. As I told you, I'm learning to use Zoom. Okay, I don't use it very well. So this is a learning I'm enjoying a lot. So if you want, we can start now. First, well, I want to welcome everyone from different countries to this online session where we will check learning, a state of mystery and wonder. So thank you for being here. For some people it's already evening, for some others it's very early, but thank you very much everyone for being here. Remember that these sessions are to reconnect, to be with the community, to make a bigger community from all over the world, and also to refresh knowledge. Remember that when we open these spaces, we can refresh what we already know and learn more about neurosemantics. I want to tell you also that these sessions are to recharge our spirits, our minds. So well, let's start. Welcome everyone again. And I want to set some frames before we start. Can you please mute your microphones, please? Okay, well, that can be the first frame, okay? Mute your microphones, okay? Because we sometimes listen to these conversations or barking or motors, etc., etc. So that can be the first frame. Mute your microphones. Remember that these sessions are 90 minutes. So we will spend these 90 minutes learning, getting information, and as I told you before, refreshing and reconnecting. If you have any questions, please send the messages, write a question, the word question, and then your question so that we can, well, read your questions and send them to the moderator. So if you have any questions, let us know. We will be in charge. We're going to get some of the questions and send them. And I think that it's time to start. Okay, and we're going to introduce the institutes in all over the world. So let me know if you can see this.
Yes.
Okay. So one of the frames is that every time you see, well, when you see your institutes, you can unmute your microphone and clap and do something to share and to cheer up this session. And we're going to start with the Institutes of Neurosemantics USA. Okay, the contact person is Jason Schneider, and there are other people back in the United States. So we would like to listen to people from the United States cheering up.
Yay!
Great.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, what about Egypt and the Middle East? Let's listen.
أحلى سلام من مصر.
يلا الروعة.
تونسيا.
Oh, Felicia.
We are cheerful people.
Okay, South Africa.
Hey!
Philippines, the Philippines.
Woohoo! Go Philippines!
Yay! Magandang gabi sa inyo.
Indonesia, my friends forever. Brazil.
Brasil agora! Quero falar o contato, nosso presidente, o Aras, o nosso site, o Facebook, YouTube e o Instagram aqui, uau!
Thank you.
Australia.
Australia.
Woohoo! Hey!
How warm. The Institute in Europe, Germain.
Yeah, Jermaine.
Hey, everybody.
Hi from Europe.
Hey!
Who found that photo?
Me.
You did? Oh my gosh. Excellent. Thank you.
Malaysia.
Yes! Malaysia!
Yeah.
Latin America, Mexico.
Hey!
Diddly-doo, diddly-doo.
Skandinavien.
我们中国啦
Hello, hello.
China.
中国 Hello， 我们欢呼一下
Mandy.
Hello，
Hello， 大家好。
大家好，大家好，大家好。
大家好啊。
Well, it was a welcome from every country that we have in the Institute. You know who to contact, and remember to be in contact with them, reconnect, refresh, and recharge. Well, next thing, I'm going to introduce the moderator. I'm very happy to introduce Marzuki Mohammed. I had the chance and the honor to meet him in Bali, and well, my perception was that he was a very kind, loving, sharing person, and this is an honor to introduce him. So Mohammed Marzuki, known as Grandfather de Fungi, he's a father of 10 children, 5 children, and he's a grandfather of 10 grandchildren. He has been a trainer for 10 years and a meta coach for 13 years. He has an extensive experience in the field of human capital development. He creates a learning classroom that is dynamic and it's memorable. He employs accelerated learning technology in his presentations. He has proven these methods and he has improved the level of comprehension of others. Well, I'm very happy to introduce Marzuki Mohammed. Let's give him a hand.
Thank you, Adrian, for that wonderful introduction. I suspect you went to my LinkedIn profile to download that.
No, I'm learning.
So everyone, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to all of you, and welcome. Michael, trainers, coaches, neurosemanticists from all over the world to this session. I'm excited because this topic on learning is a passion of mine. So thank you, Michael, for agreeing to present this topic. However, before we begin, I'd like to mention a few things. I'd like to invite you to learn about learning for yourself, for your personal growth and development. And at the same time, as trainers and coaches, to learn about learning for training and coaching. The question that I frequently think when I conduct training program is that, are they learning? How do I know that they are learning? What evidence do I have that they are learning? So that's why I'm excited about this session that we are going to have, because I hope that those questions will be answered for me at least. And I hope that it will be something that is useful for you as well. Now, the time frame that we have for this particular session is 60 minutes. I'm allocating about 45 minutes for Michael to deliver the presentation with me, having a conversation with him about this topic. And at the end, about 15 minutes for question and answers. Sean is helping me to collect the questions, and he'll be sending the questions to me. So at any time you have any questions, just put it in the chat box, and Sean will be sending those questions to me. So I will get to those questions during the Q&A. Okay. So at the same time, just to remind you that there may be lots and lots of questions in the time frame that we have. I may not be able to ask them for you and get answers from Michael. So for that, I apologize from the beginning. So are you ready to get started?
Mm-hmm. But before we start, I need to introduce Michael Hall, you know?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, okay. Make this real short because everybody knows.
Okay, so, well, it's a pleasure and honor to introduce Michael Hall. Remember that he has written more than 60 books and hundreds of articles focused on meaning and performance. Remember that Michael Hall is the modeler or a modeler of expertise. He has completed modeling projects such as modeling resilience, self-reflexive consciousness, etc., etc. And personally, I am very honored to present him, to introduce him, since I like to work close to him, and I have always noticed this loving approach to people, especially to me. Thank you very much, Michael, and welcome. Let's give him a hand.
Well, thank you. What we're going to talk about today, as I wrote about the introduction, is something that most people find boring and dull, and they start yawning. Oh yes, I know about learning. What I'm hoping will accomplish today is to awaken you to the mystery of learning, the wonder of learning, and the secret of learning. Just to offer some shocking statements here at the beginning, most adults stop learning. So most adults on this planet do not learn. They just repeat what they already know. And one evidence of that is that the average college graduate, not high school graduate, the average college graduate does not read one book a year. Does not read one book a year. So most people do not stay as learners. A lot of them got learning beat out of them in school. And when they think about learning, they just think about pain and being dumb and being critiqued and being insulted, and they just want to have nothing to do with it. And so what do most adults spend their time doing? Well, entertainment and diversions of a million things, anything but learning. So we've got to recover the wonder, the mystery, the excitement of learning, because every one of you is involved in facilitating learning. If you're a coach, if you're a trainer, if you're a consultant, if you're a parent, if you write, you are involved in facilitating people to learn. But what does it mean to learn? I want to get to that definition in just a couple minutes. But first, I want to talk about the power of learning. Here's another shocking statement. Everything you are today, whatever you've accomplished, however you define yourself, everything you are is a function of learning. Because when you were born, you came out of that womb and you were helpless and you were inarticulate, you were ignorant, you were incompetent, you were someone had to hold you and feed you and take care of you for years and years and years. Everything you are today is a function of your learning. So you learned to be who you are, and you can learn to be who you want to be. Learning is the heartbeat of humanity because we have no informational instincts. So you have to learn everything. You came into this world knowing nothing. Whatever you know, whether it's true or not true, accurate or not accurate, whether it informs you and enhances your life or is toxic and dysfunctional and you want to commit suicide, whatever you've learned, you learned it. You can unlearn it. We'll talk about unlearning. So everything we are comes from learning. So it makes learning pretty important. How do we do that? What is its structure? In neurosemantics, we put a lot of focus on self-actualizing. That is, being the best version of you. That's a function of learning. You've got to learn that. You've got to comprehend what that means. You've got to give it significant meaning. And then you've got to integrate it so that it changes the way you live, you operate, you talk, you behave. And so self-actualization is a function of learning. So just about everything is a function of learning. And some of the reasons to learn would be to develop skills and competencies, to handle life's challenges, to solve problems. If you're a great learner, you learn how to solve problems. And if you learn how to solve problems, you're creative, develops your creativity, your ability to innovate, your ability to have the job you want, to have the kind of relationships you want, to have the kind of health and wealth that you want. I've been reading a lot in the field of education, the field of learning, and research now shows that people who are continuous learners are 20 to 30% above people in health, wellness, and in wealth. So for money and for well-being would be some of the values of learning. Learning gives you more options, gives you more choices. You can then learn how to make great decisions, learn how to take effective action in the world. So learning, another piece of research has shown that a continuous learner, every additional year of learning that you add increases your IQ. You become more intelligent. I mean, we've got a lot of stupid people on this planet doing a lot of stupid stuff, destructive stuff, toxic stuff, hurtful stuff. And if we're going to raise the intelligence of people on this planet, which is what you and I do with coaching and training, consulting, then helping them to keep learning, to keep thinking, to use their brain is part and parcel of what we in neurosemantics and metacoaching, that's what we're all about. So learning is the most important thing for each of us and every day. So when we ask the question, what is learning? The simplest and most superficial answer is that it is gathering data, it is gathering more information, it is knowing something that you didn't know. a great test is at the end of every day, what did I learn today? What did you learn today? Ask it for your children at dinner time. What did you learn today? And you want to get the facts, but any computer can input data. You're really not done a human thing by inputting data. So just because you read something doesn't mean you learned something. Learning makes a difference in how you live. Learning makes a difference in how you feel and think, who you are. So what have you learned that's changing you? In meta coaching, we say that learning and change are two sides of the same thing. We take Gregory Bateson's levels of learning and we turn it into levels of change. It's the same thing. When you learn something, your brain literally, physically, neurologically is different. Neurons are running, neural pathways are being activated, synapses are being jumped. Your brain is being different and you're going to be different. When you make a change, you've learned something. Might be useful for you, may not be useful for you, but you've learned something. So learning is drawing a conclusion, representing something in your mind, drawing a conclusion, creating a concept, and making a new abstraction of meaning. But here's the problem. You can learn a lot of wrong things. You can learn a lot of stupid things. You can learn a lot of things that's going to be detrimental to yourself, to your health, to your relationships. So we have to define learning as something that enhances, empowers, that brings out our best, that challenges us to step up, to be our best self. So learning has to be ecological, or it's not really, well, it's just learning the wrong things. So real learning, when we're born as young children, I've never met a young infant or child that wasn't absolutely excited and delighted and joyful about learning. We must have a drive, a need, a hunger for learning, for information, for meaning, for knowledge. We must have a hunger for that that's innate, that's inherent inside of us. And the problem with most schools is they kill it. And so people come out of school and they have the attitude that everything I need to know I've already learned. And they become know-it-alls. And their minds become dull and they create problems and don't know how to solve the problems. So learning. Let me mention 9 things that learning is. Learning is stretching out of your comfort zone. And so expect learning to be mentally, emotionally, and personally challenging. So when you ask the question, what have you learned today? Were you mentally, emotionally, and personally challenged? If you weren't, you probably just rehashed what you already know. And you didn't actually stretch out of your comfort zone and into the zone of not knowing. Here's the wonderful thing about learning. You only learn what you did not know. Because if you know it, if you already knew it, then you're just rehashing. You're just rehearsing what you already know, which is valuable, but it's not learning. So what do you know now that you did not know an hour ago? What did you know now that you did not know when you woke up this morning? So learning is stretching, and it's wrestling with ideas or problems. And so it requires active involvement. Number 2, learning is questioning. So those of you who are trainers, you ask your audience, what questions do you have? If they have no questions, if nothing is an inquiry in their mind, are they learning? So Marzuki, I think that is part of the question of how we can tell if someone is learning. Do they have a challenging question? If they go, no, I'm fine, they're probably not learning, they're not engaged. And so with questions, we can create for ourselves all kinds of stimulating opportunities. So anybody who's bored with life, they have not learned how to be interested, captivated, fascinated, absorbed by life. Learning is questioning. Number 3, learning is discovering. This is what makes for children, they're so excited because they discover something new, different. And so learning is discovering. And this is where you discover more by mistakes than by correction, by correct answers. When you are correct, well, okay, I gave the correct answer. But when you don't know, and when you miss it, and you have to make distinctions, so learning is discovering what you didn't know, and it requires that fascination of curiosity. So let your mind sparkle with curiosity and be surprised. You might ask the question this way: what surprised you today? So if you're a trainer or coach, at the end of the coaching session, ask, what surprised you? In our coaching dialogue, what surprised you today? If a person isn't constantly being surprised, then they're not moving into the area of the unexpected, the unknown, the unpredictable, the not known. So learning is discovering. Learning is experiencing. So here's the other thing about learning. We sometimes make a distinction. What we do is experiential learning. Well, actually, all learning is experiential. Because if you're not experiencing it, if it's just head intellectual and you're not experiencing it and have an internal subjective experience with that information, then you're really not learning and your neurology is not going to be activated. And so it is experiencing, and it'll keep you alive and thriving if you're experiencing it. So another question, a learning question, is what did you experience with this information? And that's a great coaching question. Number 5, learning is meaning making. We're inventing understandings, knowledge, concepts, ideas. We're formulating an internal model in our mind, and we're giving meaning, significance, importance to the things that we are now understanding. And so it goes right to the heart of meaning making. And you can make meanings that are going to be enlivening you and empowering you, or you can make meanings that are dysfunctional. Learning is experimenting. Experimenting. To learn is to make a guess. I'm going to guess that this is going to happen. Your brain actually is an anticipatory machine, anticipating what's going to happen in the future, predicting, if I do this, this will happen. And sometimes you guess right, and sometimes you guess wrong, but you're experimenting. Learning and thinking is the very heart of the scientific mindset or attitude. Let me create an idea, a hypothesis, and now let me test it to see, did it work? Did it not work? How well did it work? What do I need to do to refine it? So, what experiments did you do today? How did you experiment with yourself, with other people today? The next one is learning is focusing attention. So learning is taking my attention and now focusing it, concentrating it, say inhibiting what could get in the way and resisting other thoughts and awareness so that I can focus in on and attend to. Children naturally will do that, that they will focus in on something. Watch a little child watching an ant. They will just be fascinated by how it moves or picks up a little piece of something and carries it, and that focus. And so focusing and managing that is at the very heart of learning, and it's driven by intention. What do you want to focus on? What are you intending to focus on? And then focus becomes our tool for where we're sending our mind, our brain, and what we're learning. Learning is remembering. That's the next one. It's retaining. Because if you learned something, or if you knew something, had a construction, and you immediately forgot it, well, that's the problem with people who suffer from dementia or Alzheimer's. They don't remember. So learning is remembering. You've got your short-term memory, your working memory, you got your long-term memory, you got your autobiographical memory, your episodic memory. You've got many, many kinds of memories in your brain, and learning is activating that memory so that once you start to learn things and once you become an adult, you bring to every learning your background knowledge. So it's a catch-22 in terms of stretching, experimenting, experiencing something new and different, and being surprised, because the larger your background memory and your background knowledge, the more challenging it's going to be to find something new and different. But that'll be the heart of learning. Finally, learning is fun. Learning is joyous. Learning is this discovery. And what happens in your brain is that the endorphins and the dopamine is going to be rewarding you every time you find something. Oh, there's something. There's an idea. And so your brain is designed to give you lots of pleasure with learning. So how much fun did you have reading that book? Would be a great learning question at the end of the day. So there's 9 things that learning is.
Thank you, Michael, for the 9 things. Because with those 9 things, I'm already thinking of the summary questions that we as trainers and coaches can ask participants to detect whether they are learning or not. And at the same time, as you earlier mentioned, that many adults are not learning, they don't desire learning. And when you gave these 9 points, I'm picking up a few of them that's causing that. For example, questioning. As children, many children, when they grow up, they are being prohibited from questioning. Experimenting is another one. So when you gave this definition about learning, then it gave me lots and lots of answers there. Now,
think about what learning killers are from what you just said. Don't ask questions. Don't think too much. Don't fool around experimenting. Those are learning killers.
And the other thought that comes to mind as you listed these 9 things, where does, because when it comes to learning, Bloom's taxonomy is the one that people normally mention about. So where does this come in?
Well, that goes to how to learn. So the distinction is what is learning versus how do you go about learning. And there's multiple ways of learning.
So there are multiple ways of learning. And you gave some information to me regarding the twofold nature of learning. Can you just go into that? Would that be okay with you now?
Sure. So another distinction we can make about learning is that there's the content, what you're learning, and then the process of how you're learning. So the process of learning is learning how to learn. And if there's one thing that the field of education has discovered, NLP has been talking about this since the 1980s, and that is more than teaching children what to think, what to learn, we need to teach them how to learn. Yes, we need probably about 20% of content. Learn this, learn that. But content keeps changing. Content and the curriculum keeps getting updated. And by the time they get out of school, I don't know, half or more of the information they learn no longer relevant. So the key is if they learned how to learn, and that'd be the structure. And that's what we focus on in NLP, how we learn. And the most basic is we learn through our senses. So what are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you sensing, feeling, kinesthetic? And so turning on the languages of the mind and being able to represent it and representationally track it from the outside to the inside. Because if you can't track it from the outside to the inside, most learning disabilities of children in school is because it is so heavily visual and it's very weak in terms of auditory and kinesthetic. In fact, kinesthetic learners, children, are told, sit still, but they need to move to learn it kinesthetically. And so we need to have a richer curriculum in terms of content, in terms of how to learn and how to represent. One of the goals in NLP, of NLP practitioner, is that everybody who graduates should be able to make a rich visual representations in their mind with auditory sounds and having all kinds of sounds and tones and voices, as well as kinesthetically to be able to feel it and to create your semantic space with it. I mean, that should be minimum.
When you mentioned that learning requires the kinesthetics instead of just visual, reminds me of my granddaughter when she attended Meta-NLP and APG. She was 12 when she attended that. And she was just doing cartwheels at the back of the where the other participants are seated. And she's able to bring out thoughts and ideas about what she learned because she's learning it bodily. And this is also something that I just want to ask you further, that with respect to schools, they are more concerned about content rather than the process. So what does that do to the learning?
Yeah. So this is called metacognition, meta-learning, the ability to learn and know how you learn. A great question is, how do you learn best? How do you sequence the visual, the auditory, kinesthetic? How do you sequence your use of concepts? Do you know how you construct a concept? Do you know what are the thinking patterns involved in doing that? And so metacognition is the ability to know and to be constantly adjusting, self-regulating your own learning strategies. The other thing about learning how to learn is different subjects require different strategies. Learning English requires, or learning language requires one strategy, learning mathematics, another, geometry, another, anatomy, another. Every subject requires a different strategy. We know that in NLP. So in NLP, we model leadership. And we don't assume that the strategy for leadership is the same as the strategy for management. Two different strategies. A different strategy for supervising, or for mentoring, or for delegating. Every subject has a different strategy, And if you use the same strategy, you're going to really weaken your learning ability. You're going to reduce it so that you're not a good learner.
That to me is substantial, because one of the things that I had in my mind as I come to this session was I noticed that in certain areas, for example, driving, I learned that very easily. But when it comes to playing the guitar, I just cannot learn that. So that is significant in the sense that I was not using the right strategy for the subject.
Right.
It's just that in schools, we are taught only one strategy to learn.
So here's where a teacher, a coach, a trainer needs to be able to know what learning is. If I was going to teach someone the guitar, I would have to be teaching them essentially, here's where to put your focus and your attention. Here's what to experiment with. Here's what to discover. Here's how to have fun with that. Here's what you need to retain. So, and that's going to be different with the guitar, with driving, with any other learning thing. Our focus is different in each one. Our intention is different in each one. So knowing what learning is enables you now to truly mentor or consult or coach someone into learning whatever it is that they need to be learning.
Wow, that opens up new dimensions for me. Thank you for that one. And just moving on from the content and the process, moving on to the learning dimensions, because you mentioned that with this new research, you have also changed Learning Genius training manual. So I'm just excited to know about the neurosemantics model, the new neurosemantics model that you've just developed. So, Michael.
So obviously learning is multi-dimensional. There's so many dimensions to learning. I sat down as I started going through all the books on learning and education that I have. Then as I bought other books, going through them, starting to identify all the different dimensions. And when I got done and started collecting them into some kind of a model, it turned out to be 7 dimensions. All of these dimensions are learning, different facets, different dimensions. They're somewhat sequential, but they're also completely simultaneous. So the first dimension is state. Learning is a mind-body state. Well, we know that. Sometimes we ask the question, are you in a good learning state? Because there's all kinds of states that are not good learning states. And essentially anything of stress, fear, anger, negativity is going to kill learning. It's just obvious. So learning is a state. Once you start learning and you're gathering information, learning is representation. And so one of the ways to find out if someone has learned, what are you representing in your mind? If I could peek into the theater of your mind, what would I see, hear, and sense? What's playing there? So if you can't represent it, then you're not holding it in place and keeping it and knowing it. So learning is representation. Learning is conceiving. It's conceptualizing and understanding. What that means is we organize. So I get this fact and that fact and different facts together, and then I organize it, conceive of something, and that idea does not exist out there. It is constructed, a concept. And I do this as I create categories. First thing children do, create categories. So humans, animals, categories. Parents, teachers, categories. Boys, girls, category. So what's in this category of math or this category of grammar? And so we put things in categories. Don't exist out there in the world. They're a construct of the mind. And to learn is to learn categories and to learn how categories fit into other categories. And so learning are these categories and these strategies in which we abstract, we step back and conceptualize something. We conceptualize rules. We conceptualize guidelines, heuristics, and all kinds of things. So learning involves all that conceptual learning that we do mostly through language. The fourth one is, once we've made this learning, representational and conceptual, we remember. And so this is background learning. So the dimension of background learning. As an adult, every time you go to learn something, you're bringing a whole lot of background learnings already, and that's where you have biases. They may be useful, they may not. Prejudices, judgments, evaluations. Trying to lose our mind and come to our senses is really difficult for an adult because we have all this, I remember, and the background knowledge. Most of that's unconscious. And so learning is the updating of new information into my old information. And that's how most unlearning occurs. We're updating. Sometimes we have to get the old stuff out because it's just wrong. And it creates paradigms and models and understand that just doesn't work. And so we have to intentionally negate it. So that's number 4, the background learning. The 5th dimension is the meta dimension. The dimension in which I can step aside and now notice how I'm learning, how I'm representing, how I'm conceiving, how I'm remembering. And now this meta learning level also has things like, what do I think of myself as a learner? What do I think about my history of learning? What do I think about my future of learning? What's my intention of learning? With the meta level of learning, we can monitor how am I learning? We can monitor our learning. We can do self-regulation of our learning. This is the place where the executive functions really come into full play. And this is a new development in the field of education. It's about 20 years old. Executive functioning education. There's about 12 executive functions that people have, theorists in the field of education have been identifying, and they have been shifting to, this is what we need to teach children, how to be aware of how they're learning, how to regulate it, how to manage their focus, how to remember, because all of that comes from the frontal lobes and the prefrontal lobes of the brain. And so the meta dimension of learning. The 6th dimension is experiential. And so this is the integration dimension, integrating learning. A person who doesn't do this creates a knowing, doing gap. I know, but I can't do. And so integration, integrating it. You got a motor cortex, you got an associative cortex. The motor cortex is what is integrating what we know in our mind into our neurology so that we can play the guitar, we can drive the car, we can do whatever the skill is that we want to do. So the integration is closing that knowing doing gap so that it's truly experiential. And this is where change starts occurring in the person. The 7th dimension is the pragmatic dimension. And this is where we can tell if the person has learned. So pragmatically, can you do it? What is the skill? What are the sub-skills? What's on a range of the skill? Are you incompetent, competent? Do you have expertise? Do you have mastery? So the skill itself, as it's pragmatically, now you can talk out that learning, you can act out that learning, you can create something, you can innovate something. And so the pragmatism of learning, and this is where we test and assess, benchmark to see if the person has actually made that learning or made that change. So the 7 dimensions are all occurring simultaneously. And a lot of learning disabilities is a disability or a deficit because one or more of these dimensions are missing. And so as a good checklist, take a learning. Are you in the right state? Are you representing it accurately and appropriately given that subject? What concepts are you drawing from that? How accurate or useful? How will you test it? How will you experiment with it? What are you going to hold in mind that becomes the basis for what you're doing? At the meta level, how do you think of yourself as a learner? And how are you monitoring your learning and regulating it? And how are you integrating it? And the pragmatism of let's test it to see how real it is.
Okay.
Wow, Michael, those are all delicious stuff to me. And I've got lots and lots of questions, as you mentioned that. However, I noticed that there are questions from the rest of the trainers and coaches in this group. So I'll rest my questions first. Are you ready to answer some of these questions, Michael?
Sure, be glad to.
Okay, so I'll just take one of these. The first one that I have over here is the question of what is the cause of lack of fun in learning?
Mostly, we have not given it significant meaning. If it's meaningful, it'll be fun. If it's valuable and you value it, and so this is that meta dimension of learning. And if people leave out the intention, why am I learning this? Why is it important? So here's a big thing in schools. Teachers tend to assume the children know why grammar, math is important.
Yeah.
And if they don't sell it, teachers need to be sellers. They need to sell it. We as coaches and trainers need to sell it. Here's why. And when people know why it's important, so that's the meta dimension, and then it will be fun.
Okay. So is that why we have the format system? We cover the why first?
Yeah.
Okay. Another question here is that what meta programs are involved for flexibility in learning?
Well, meta programs are thinking patterns. Okay. So every meta program will be useful in learning some subject. And some meta programs will be detrimental to learning other things. If you're learning to play the guitar, don't use options. That flexibility will prevent you from learning the guitar. So you need procedures for learning guitar or anything that has a procedure like playing the piano or doing anything like that. So it all depends on the subject and which meta program will guide your focus and your attention in the right way.
Thank you. So now I need to make sure that I play my meta programs in the right way when I'm learning different things. Okay, a question here from Veronica. What is the highest intention for learning?
Well, that'll be individual for each of us. I can recommend some things. Learn so that you become your best self. Learn so that you self-actualize. Learn so that you become a great problem solver. Learn so that you're a great learner. Learn so that you can enrich and enhance the lives of other people. So I'd recommend some of those. But everybody will have to find their own way. You might want to learn so that you can learn how to be healthy and fit. You might want to learn so that you can be a better lover, a better parent. So everybody will have to find their own. There is no one highest. At the spiritual level, it's to please God. It's to be fully responsible as a human being on this planet.
Thank you. Another question here is, how does meta-detailing operate with learning?
So it starts with details. I know some people will hate that, but it starts with, because you've got to get the facts in. Then you work the facts. If you start with the global, you're up at their concept level and it's not grounded. So it makes perfect sense. In school, you learn the alphabets one by one. You learn the digits, 1, 2, 3, 4. You learn the basic details and facts, and you got to remember those details. That's where memorization becomes so useful to memorize the alphabet, to memorize the additional chart or the multiplication chart, because now you got a basis from which to work. Details have to come first. Once you have the details, you go meta, get the frame that holds those details in place. And now you can meta detail.
Right, thank you. Reminds me that I'm learning professional coaching with Sean right now. It's very uncomfortable because we are going deeper and deeper into details.
Details.
A question from Yosra. Is forcing a specific system in school education helpful to children, or does it hinder their creativity?
I'd have to know more about that question to really answer it properly. Generally, we need to fit school to the learning strategies of children instead of imposing one structure. One structure for all will not work because there are many different learning styles. Howard Gardner came up with 7 multiple intelligences. Each intelligence describes a way of learning. He expanded that to 8, and now he has expanded it to 9 learning intelligences. So knowing your strengths, playing to your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, and strengthening your weaknesses, bringing it up as best as possible, it is probably the larger picture of what we should be doing.
You mentioned the 7 dimensions. One of them, the remember bit. The thought that comes to mind, that remember bit is also what is preventing people from learning new things, because new information may go against what they remember.
Yeah. So the book that will be available around September, I've got a whole chapter on unlearning. Because if you don't know how to unlearn, which is in the meta-learning dimension, if you don't know how to unlearn, what you just said then becomes a learning killer. And this is what stops a lot of people from learning. They don't know how to update, and they don't know how to identify problematic concepts that's getting in the way. We call them limiting beliefs, limiting decisions, limiting identities.
Thank you. Let me get to another question. How do we handle our bias in our background learning, especially when in society where lots of people are not learning? That comes from Irfan.
Okay. So this is where the three different things can help learning. Cognitive distortions. I would suggest memorize all 14. The cognitive biases, I put them into 7 categories in the book, Executive Learning, and the cognitive bias fallacies. The fallacies are false ways of reasoning. That's what we do in the conceptual dimension, how we reason. And they're false ways of reasoning. It's just wrong. The cognitive biases are heuristics that generally work, but not always. So that's where you have to just keep testing it and to see if I got the confirmation bias or the availability bias or a bias that is preventing me from being open to new learning. The cognitive distortions are the learning history we all go through as children that we have to outgrow. So the cognitive distortions, overgeneralizing, personalizing, awfulizing, emotionalizing, ways that children think, and to some extent appropriate for children, but totally inappropriate for adults. So that's your threefold checklist, and being able to check yourself against that. To do that takes you to the meta dimension of learning, because now you're self-monitoring and self-regulating. And this is where also having a learning buddy, a learning coach, someone who can give you feedback on those 3 dimensions where the cognitions can go wrong.
Okay, now another question. This is from Primvada. How do we as trainers invite learning from people who come into the session with the attitude of I know it all?
That's a great question. Well, you're going to have to stir them up. You're going to have to shock them. You have to bring them face to face with what they don't know or what they think they know that doesn't work. And so this is where interrupt patterns work, jarring statements work, and getting them to now experiment with their knowledge to see where it breaks down. It's a toxic state. In the book, Executive Thinking, I've got a continuum of thinking. And to the far left is 6 different kinds of non-thinking. And the know-it-all, the certainty, I'm certain, is one form of non-thinking. It kills thinking. And you can't learn if you can't think. And the first step of thinking is considering. Well, try it on. You don't have to believe it. Just try it on. The second step of thinking is questioning. Well, ask some questions about it, explore it, probe it. We do that with a meta model. So getting a person to asking questions and considering, I know this doesn't fit for you. If it did, what would you feel? Is inviting a person to step out of the know-it-all state into doing something radical, like actually thinking.
Okay. Now, when I asked that question, came to mind an experience that I had because when I had a know-it-all in the room who kept rubbishing me after every second sentence that I spoke. I did not manage to evoke the learning state in him because the other participants in the room ran him out of the room before I could do that. Okay, Michael, another question here from Yosra. Do children with ADHD symptoms have trouble learning because of the attention deficit?
So the medical doctor, the psychiatrist who invented attention deficit disorder, ADD, he later created a website and he said, my work has been misunderstood and misapplied. He said, probably of all the people diagnosed with ADD, only 7% potentially even have it. That is, it's not there is no lesion in the brain or neurological damage that causes them attention deficit. What we say in neurosemantics is it's probably intention deficit, that they don't want to study grammar or math or whatever. That the children, if they can stay with a video game, they can stay with a movie, there's nothing wrong with their attention. So the great majority of children who are put on Ritalin and other drugs to regulate and calm them down is probably over-medicated and over-diagnosed. What probably has not happened is they have not, no one has spent the time to help them to learn how to use their focus and use their attention and manage it. And that's the executive function that needs to be trained. Because without that, it's going to be hard for them to learn any particular content.
When you mentioned that only 7% of children who were diagnosed with ADD actually had ADD, I was simply overwhelmed by emotion, thinking about the 93% who went through that regime and there's nothing wrong with them.
Yeah.
Okay, so I need to.
Yeah, schools have been designed for the comfort of the teacher, not the learning ability of the children. And you know, some new schools are getting around that. We're slowly waking up to it. There's lots of books and research on this subject, encouraging schools to redesign, rethink how they're doing it. But it's slow in catching up. And I think the teachers' unions are at the heart of what's holding it back.
I'll take another question here because we are running short of time. Just one more question from Anna. Once you are adults with many dysfunctional patterns, how to awaken the learning? How to provide some simple tools to activate learning again?
Well, find something you're fascinated in. So it may be the guitar, it may be flowers, it may be birds, it may be hiking the mountains, it may be swimming. Find something you're fascinated in, and think about how you learn that. We have limited learning to book learning. Learning from a book is just one aspect of learning. Learning from a person, that's what coaching's all about. A coach is a learning coach, helping a person learn to be their best self. And so pick something simple that you have fun learning, you're fascinated in it, and recover the joy of learning. And once you do that with one thing, go somewhere else. If you can't think of something, find somebody who you can see in their face and their physiology that they are in love with learning something. And to go, how do you do that? So just go model that and you'll start to pick up the ideas and the realization. And once it gets activated, that learning drive will awaken. And as you learn how to learn and how you learn best, it will awaken and take you through a lot of those dysfunctions.
Thank you for that answer, Michael. I'd like to mention here that there are quite more questions in there. So this topic really interests the trainers and coaches that we have this evening. It's just that we are running short of time because I want to give some time for you, Michael, to summarize or conclude whatever it is that we have discussed this evening. What final words would you like to say about this?
Learning is a gift. Learning is a dynamic gift that you can use to change yourself, to change the world. If we're going to change the world, it's going to be through helping people learn better. So learning is the secret for changing the world. And let us start with us, becoming great learners. Let us exemplify the attitude of open-mindedness, considering, enjoying, playing, delighting, and actualizing our highest values and meanings, our best performances. If we're good models of dynamic learning, then other people will go, can I have some of that? So may you be a great learner.
So thank you, Michael, for that. Really appreciate your giving us this time, all of this stuff that we're learning. I've got a full on my charts here. At the same time, there are so many things that you've mentioned there that we can pick further. Just to inform those who are here this evening that we are making a recording of this this session, and I will be putting up the link to the recording so that we can add some more points to whatever that we have said there. So again, Michael, thank you for this presentation this evening. Really appreciate that. And with that, I also like to say thank you to all of you for being here, for asking those questions. I apologize, I cannot ask all of those questions because we are short of time. So for that, I'm sorry. And with that, I'd like to pass the session back to Adrian. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you. Don't forget to take pictures, please.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Michael, for your time, for giving us this session. I learned to learn, and I want to tell you that I take away 3 important things. If you're a great learner, you can solve problems. A continuous learner do things better. And learning is the secret for changing the world, because if we change and help others, this world can be better. So thank you, Michael, for your time. Thank you, Marzuki, also for your time, for being the moderator and keep track of the questions. It was a pleasure to see you again. And thank you, all of you participants from all over the world. And well, I just want to remind you that the next community gathering will be on June the 12th. Be attentive to this new invitation. Remember this time, June the 12th. And well, remember that we're going to take the pic. Please mute your microphones and try not to send messages while the pictures are taken. So thank you, everyone. See you next time. It was a pleasure to be here with you, and see you later. Thank you very much.
Tarek will take the picture.
So I'll be taking the pictures. Yes. So I'd like you, everyone, to just stay still while I'm preparing for that. Okay, so please open your cameras. Everyone, open your cameras. Get ready. Open your cameras. So we're ready for the picture.
How long do we need to smile, Tarek?
Don't smile yet. I'll let you know, but get ready. So just open your cameras. And we're getting ready for that. Okay, so I still see a few people who who don't have their camera on, so please turn on your camera, everyone. Okay, we are ready. Okay, so yes, turn on your camera, everyone. Okay, so have a big smile. Ready? 1, 2, and keep smiling for just need 4 seconds. Okay, so first page. Okay, keep smiling. Okay, keep smiling. And last page. Keep smiling. And thank you everyone for that.
Thank you.
Pictures or charcoal drawings, Mohammed?
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you, Says
everyone.
Mohammed.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you
Thank you,
all.
Adrian.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Marzuki.
Say Michael. Say again, Loudon.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Good night.
Bye.
Irfan?
Thank you.
Yes. Vijay?
Unable to
Bye-bye.
for some reason.
Bye-bye from Malaysia.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye from Tunisia.
Yes, Indonesia.
Bye-bye from Tunisia.
Bye-bye.
Bye from Tunisia.
Bye. Bye from Mexico.
Hey, hello, Mexico.
Yes, brother.
Bye, Mexico.
Bye-bye. Bye, Mexico.
Bye-bye. Oh, there's a beautiful baby. Oh.
Baby 好得意，真係好得意啊！
Was she listening to the presentation?
Yes, she was participating.
She's preparing
Learn how to learn from baby.
This is another dimension.
Baby learning.
Yeah.
Baby learning. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
See you later.
Vijay, you want to say
Now you
something?
can go for your